We're a month into float tour now.
We're now a month into float tour.
1 month
into float tour.
on the road.
We have visited 56 float centers so far. Pretty impressive, I would say.
So that's about, what, a sixth or a seventh of the ones that are
Something-
in the US and Canada? It's
something
hard to
like
say.
that.
As we travel around, we find ones that are listed that are closed and new ones that haven't been listed that are now open.
Yeah, it's kind of surprising how hard it can be to figure out where they all are. More than anything, actually, finding float centers and asking them what else is in their area has been the best source of knowledge.
Yeah, definitely. Even just doing Google searches in the area haven't turned up some of the things that the other float centers know, which I guess makes sense. Like, if anyone's going to know where float centers are, it's the ones that are
Yeah.
nearby.
Or people switch names or change locations, like, it all gets very confusing.
But it's been a total blast so far, and a total whirlwind as well. It's actually been a lot crazier just getting our road legs than I thought. But 4 weeks in, I actually feel like we're doing a pretty good job of staying on top of both the work back home and getting a chance to hang out with all the float centers as we travel around, which is awesome.
Yeah, we pretty much started this entire trip because we thought it would be super fun to hang out with float people, and that has been absolutely confirmed. Like, it is super, super fun. Everyone has been incredibly nice, everyone's been incredibly generous, everyone has been incredibly hilarious and fun to hang out with. Everywhere we go, we get to kind of swap war stories with different float centers and just get to see what everyone's been up to, which in large part has been great. Like, people are doing really well. We go places and we hear a consistent story that floating is becoming more well known in the area, and more people are coming in, and things are really starting to become stable, and they're getting lots of attention in the media, and just kind of from the West Coast through Texas through the middle of the country, like, it almost doesn't matter where we go, we hear that same story.
Yeah, it's really, I can't even think of a single one that said that they have less business now or that things are declining over the 5 weeks to a year to 5 years that they've been open. And it really is also amazing how many float centers have not been open for very long. If we'd even planned / arranged this tour for 6 months prior, so many of the float centers along our way we wouldn't have been able to see because they just wouldn't have even existed yet, which is really wild. I mean, that's kind of what I thought going into this, was just that the industry is growing incredibly rapidly, too rapidly now for us to stay on top of things, but seeing that firsthand in the form of centers that have only been around for 3 to 5 weeks is really kind of mind-boggling.
And also the centers that are opening now are, when we opened in 2010, we had 4 float tanks, and that was, like, super impressive. We were one of, like, a small handful of places with that many float tanks, and now it's just 4, 5, 6 float tanks are totally normal to see. In fact, like, it's almost less common for us to go to a place that's opened recently, within the last 6 months, and have them have less than 4 float tanks. It really seems like the places are opening are bigger and really committing to floating as the central focus of their business, as opposed to some of the older places have kind of a wide variety of different services where floating fits in.
And yeah, the ones that do have 1 or 2 or 3 float tanks almost all seem like they're expanding as well.
Mm-hmm.
Whether it's to a different location or just adding in 1 or 2 more float tanks into the current center that they have. Yeah, again, it's very rare to find a place that's not thinking about expansion and is just totally fine with 2 float tanks and maxing that out and doesn't think they can fill any more.
Yeah.
So overall, really good news for the industry as a whole, I think. Probably.
I hope, yeah.
And one of the other things, too, is just asking these float centers the same kind of set of questions as we do interviews with them. It's really neat seeing the same sorts of answers pop up over and over again. From the way that they got into floating, which almost everyone says that they got into it because they themselves floated and just ended up loving it, and it really affected their lives in a deep way. And they knew, some of them, actually almost all of them, after their first float, or after their first 2 floats, that this is what they wanted to do. They wanted to open up a float tank center, which it had totally derailed our lives when we found floating. But it's interesting to hear that that's not the anomaly, that it's actually really common for people to encounter this strange practice and just get completely sucked in to the point where now they're opening their own 4-tank center.
And you can tell, too, it's so clear that people's main motivation is to share floating with other people. From everywhere you go, there's, no matter what, that is core to every float center that we've seen so far, is that, like, whatever different services or, however different setups they have or what tanks they choose or all that stuff aside, like, at the core of it is someone who just really wants other people to float and is trying their best to share that experience with people.
Yeah, and it's really amazing too. You know, talking to people and getting this sense of what their advice going forward to other float tank centers is. That actually I didn't expect that to be so consistent. I really expected to end up with different gems of wisdom that we could sort of turn into videos and knowledge to pass forward. And instead, it's just sort of been the same advice over and over again, which is it's way harder than people thought getting into it. And if there's any advice, it's just do your research, know what a beastly thing it is to actually start up a float tank center, and as long as you're not in it for the money and you legitimately want to help people, it's absolutely worth all the effort. And if you are in it for the money, then it's absolutely not worth it. And you're not going to just get rich quick doing a float tank center. There's so many easier ways to make a living. It's a challenge, but getting to see the floaters come out and actually changing people's lives ends up, I think, being worth it for people. And hearing that over and over and over again for all 56 centers that we've gone to is it's really touching. It makes me feel like we're a part of the right industry.
Yeah.
So, over the next 2 years, a float tour.
Yep, we're going to see about 1,000 more float centers.
Yeah, I mean, one of the jokes that we have is that we could get back to Portland and just not stop and keep going on float tour and visit a whole different set of centers. This could be a never-ending float tour, and we'd always have fresh centers to visit. That's how quick the industry is growing.
Yeah, there are already some that have opened back, like, past us, or behind our path. Like, we've driven past and I've looked back on, like, flotation locations. I'm like, how did we miss that spot? And I'll dig into it. I'm like, oh, they opened last week. Like, they literally were not open when we were there. It's been totally nuts.
So, if you are thinking about going on Endless Float Tour, it's totally possible.
Yeah.
You'll be inspired, and we're selling this mini Winnie when we get back to Portland. So, you know, you can even buy the Floatmobile and
Little piece of float history. Yep.
right here.
The minister.
Yeah, the old Minister Winchester. It's been treating us well, honestly. Life on the road in this thing has not been bad at all. This thing, in her... Sorry, I didn't mean to call you the thing, Minister.
I'm pretty much addicted to living in an RV now. I've never done it before this, but the ability of pulling over anywhere and then being at home is pretty much amazing. Like, we've literally, the very first night, pulled over on the side of the road and just cooked tacos, like, on the beach in front of the Pacific Ocean, and I've been hooked ever since then. I don't ever think
Still
I'm
one of my
gonna go
favorite
back.
nights was just that very first one, opening the door and
Yeah.
just having the ocean sitting right there in front of us.
So
That was really magical.
you may never see us again. We might just kind of take this thing and keep cruising into the sunset.
Drive it onto the stage for the conference.
Yep.
Drive it off again at the end. You know, for me, my favorite things during the float tour have definitely just been the centers and the center owners that we get to hang out with. Not that we've seen a whole lot else. We had to like skip the
90%
Grand
of what we've
Canyon.
seen.
We've had to skip pretty much any sites in any city that we stop by. It really has. There's so many float centers to visit. We can't even go to do other fun things in cities. It really is just a straight float tour. And of those centers, I don't, you know, other people ask me that along the way when we're hanging out with the center owners. What's my favorite centers that we've been to so far? And I don't even have an answer for them. More than anything, I think it's just been the huge variety that we actually get to visit, and the amount of different experiences and different center setups that we get to see is really very inspiring and cool. It's awesome that you can just have a one little tank center in your house and get to touch people just as deeply as an 11 tank mega center down in LA. And everything in between is, again, really inspiring, and I think great news for anyone who's looking to start up. Whatever your motivation is in starting a float tank center, you can make putting those tanks in work with whatever you want and whatever interests you have.
And it's been, you know, like when we have the conference and everybody comes out, I don't often get a chance to just hang out with people on a one-on-one level. So it's been really nice going around and getting a chance just to like go out and grab beers with somebody and just get to chat. Which is like, I pretty much feel like everybody in the float industry could also just legitimately like hang out and be friends with. Like, forget about this floating thing. If this all fell apart, I could still do this entire tour again and just go like hang out with these people, because everyone is super fun to just chill with.
Yeah, I've been joking we could have called this the visiting the nicest, coolest people in any city tour,
Yeah.
and we probably still would have had the exact same stops. The float industry really is just I mean, it shows in the line of work that people got into in the first place, but it turns out that people who decided to open float tank centers are just legitimately some of the most amazing people on the planet.
We probably plan a little bit better. I mean, we've been calling places like a day before we get there if we're doing well.
We just got our float tour shirts
Yeah, we're in
today.
Atlanta, Georgia, and we got our shirts. We were planning on getting our faces plastered along the side of the RV, but we couldn't really pull that off.
Yeah, but at the same time, it's sort of like starting a float tank center. If you wait for everything to be completely perfect before you start into a project, you'll just never get anything accomplished
Yeah,
at
we'd
all.
still be in
So,
Portland right now if we had tried to actually get everything perfectly ready for this.
yeah, at the same time, in a perfect world, sure, we'd have been more prepared, but I honestly don't think that we started at a bad spot, you know? Like, just getting it going, getting the ball rolling, and hitting the road was definitely the right decision, even in retrospect. So, yeah, I don't even know what I would do differently exactly.
I mean, like, probably adding another month onto the trip so we could actually hit a few more of those, like, really out-of-the-way float centers, because those have been really fun to visit.
You know, we did. We also launched into a crazy construction project at this exact same time back at the shop. And in retrospect, trying to go on crazy tour at the same time that we were launching into massive construction was probably not the brightest idea in the entire world.
It was a fun idea, but
Yeah, the construction got a little out of hand without us around to kind of just power through those 24-hour nights that you have to do sometimes when you're running a float tank center, which it's the lesson we're learning from every single center that we're going to is how hard construction is. So I don't know how we fucked that up ourselves as well, but we totally did. So maybe paying a little more attention to construction back home too is something we could have done a little bit better. More presents for people. We definitely did not stock up on our books or order enough cookbooks and things like that to drop off with people, which would be really nice as well.
yeah, we got t-shirts.
Yeah, things that we would do the same. Like everything else, I guess. Like it's other than that, it's been a blast. I don't really think we have done things that I regret well on tour. So we've been a little background here is that we've been listening as we go through every state to the state songs for that state, which I had no idea that some states had mini state songs. That
Some
belonged
have,
to them.
like, official state songs as well as official state waltzes and official state hymns and...
official state rock songs
Yeah.
and everything except New Jersey, which doesn't have a state song at all.
Yeah, but we're planning on making one over the course of this trip, so you know, that might not be true for that long.
You know, I actually think that Georgia really nailed its state song. The Ray Charles one for this state that we're in right now is really solid and has an amazing story behind it too, which it got adopted back in 1979. And I couldn't even track down what the Georgia state song was before that. I was doing a little Google search and I could not find it because it just displaced it. And it's Ray Charles, and he got it adopted in 1979. He went and performed live before the state legislature. And it was sort of a reconciliation for a lot of the civil rights stuff that had gone down here. And that same year, 1979, they adopted that song, specifically performed by Ray Charles, is in their kind of state song legislature. And it just kills it. Much better than kind of those hip hip hooray sort of state songs they have going, and awesome story behind it.
Yeah. Also, the California song is incredibly corny and cheesy and kind of delightful to listen to.
I love you, California.
Yeah, so highly recommended.
And New Mexico, Nuevo Mexico,
Uh-huh.
was pretty good. You definitely just look up state songs. They're on Spotify, sung pretty cheesily by this guy Rick Pickren. Who, if you're out there, Rick, and you want to join Float Tour, we're happy
If
to
you
go
think
have a
about
drink
starting
with
the
you
Float
too.
Tour,
Yeah, absolutely.
Big fan.